What's up, my Yugi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to Casual Friday. I promise that's not mine. Hawks for life. Anyway, I just got back from working out, getting fit and buff, and I figured I'd do a Casual Friday video for you guys before I go to bed for the night, so you guys have it for yourselves to enjoy in the morning. First things first, I would highly recommend that you check out my dance party playlist that I spent all night working on last night. Not really all night, just kind of about half an hour or so. It's a really fun playlist. It's great for doing homework, and that's what I'm going to be doing homework to tonight, so that's going to be something fun. Let's get down to Q&A. We begin with Hades X736 asking for tips for preparing for an event. I would say, or at least usually what I do, is that I end up spending all night working on my deck and testing and doing ratios and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend doing all night. I would recommend getting some sleep, because usually I make a ton of really big mistakes because I didn't get any sleep the night before. But in general, I would say that doing a lot of testing and a lot of thinking about ratios in particular is really important for preparing for an event. Making sure that you have a plan for keeping track of your stuff at the event is really important, because cards get stolen. I'd say in terms of your deck, other than testing a lot and thinking about ratios a lot, that's pretty much all you have to do. He also asks if I'm going to do any subscriber duels on a live stream or something. I think that that would be a lot of fun. Maybe if I bring back Saturday duels, I will be able to do that. Ara Storm asks, is Secret Forces worth investing in? Is it comparable to Dragons of Legend? I would say that it's definitely worth investing in at the beginning, at the very least, since it is the source of all things Nekroz, and Nekroz may become a really powerful deck in the TCG meta. I would say that generally we do not buy packs or even boxes as a long-term investment. It isn't an investment to buy packs because they're random and they almost never pay off in and of themselves. I'd say that if you're actually investing in individual cards that will likely have a boost on the market is probably the best way to invest in cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! But yes, it is probably a set that is worth buying. Matt S. asks how Mermail's matchups are this format. I would say that Burning Abyss is really your hardest matchup. The Cliffort matchup is really doable, and the Shadow matchup is fairly easy. Clifforts, you have a lot of ways of taking out Scout, and that's big, and you also have a lot of ways of getting rid of their Floodgate cards, and some of their Floodgate cards aren't actually that bad for you. For instance, Vanity's Emptiness you can get around real easy by using your Atlanteans to take out other cards on the board, and then once they go to the grave, then Vanity's Emptiness will kill itself. But yes, the Burning Abyss matchup is really tough. Angel Gonzalez asks, do you believe we could get a new wind-attributed elemental hero, since the only relevant one would be Stratos, and he's banned? No one wants to mask change Avian. I don't think that we're going to get another hero. I don't think that a TCG exclusive hero is really in the works right now. But we did get Blazeman, and we did get Shadow Mist, so it's entirely possible that we'll be getting an entirely new set of elemental heroes. However, it won't be anywhere in the near future for the TCG, since the OCG has had no such thing announced as of yet. So in the time period in which heroes are likely to be relevant, we're probably not going to get another wind hero to summon Kamikaze with. Faded X Duelist asks, what are some good cards to side in against Shadows and Clifforts? Against Shadows, I would definitely say that Shadow Imprisoning Mirror and some way of stopping fusions, if your deck has a really big issue with Construct and or Winda. I would recommend for most decks Defusion, since it is a quick play that can compulsory any fusion monster away, and it is at 3, so you can use 3 of that card. If you're running a dark deck and you can't use Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, I would go for Royal Command, since it's gotten its errata and it works the way that it seemed to work originally, which means that Shadow monsters, except the fusions, will not be able to activate their effects, and that's pretty darn cool. Against Clifforts, I would say MST and MST substitutes. Anything that can destroy back row is your friend, particularly Fairy Wind. The Garunix King says, you mentioned your least favorite deck, which is obviously Final Countdown, as nobody likes to play that deck, but he also asks what my least favorite non-degenerate deck is. That's a really interesting question. I don't think, with the exception of Inzectors, when they were the big meta thing, I don't think I've ever really disliked a meta deck or a non-degenerate deck. I'd say maybe, like, not even Six Samurai have really given me a problem. Maybe Lightsworns, I suppose, just because of the sacky nature, but I don't really have an issue with any non-degenerate decks. Brandymon asks, is it me, or do heroes have the worst Nekroz matchup ever. I think it's you. I think that personally, heroes seem to have a really great Nekroz matchup because of access to Darklaw. If you can put Darklaw on the board, Nekroz are basically boned because they can't send any monsters into the graveyard to use their effects. And once per turn, if they search for a monster, if they somehow manage to search for a monster, you can banish it from their hand. I think that heroes should, in theory at least, have an incredibly good hero matchup. Darkness Approaches asks, what is your favorite counter trap and what do you think of counter fairies? My favorite counter trap is Oh Fish! I also really enjoyed Solemn Judgment. I realize that it's a really frickin' broken card, and it's probably good that it's gone, but I really enjoyed it as a card. I like really good power cards, as long as they're a one-of and you know how to use them well. If they're not being used skillfully, they're no fun. As far as counter fairies, I once lost a tournament to counter fairies. It was back in the days when the Komoricon tournament wasn't at all competitive, and it was made of just a ton of scrubs, myself included at the time. And so, I mean, counter fairies are not at all good this format, just because they're really slow, and Bountiful Artemis is easy to kill, and stuff like that. They just don't do a whole lot this format, but they did really wreck me that format. The artist that I now know as Zalonge asks, if Brionic came to 1, how would I use it in Mermails? Well, I would probably run Diva, and then I would run more Aqua Spirits, so that I can go into 6s more easily. He also asks what my thoughts on Nekroz armor of Catastor and Decisive Armor is. I think that Catastor is a really terrible card. I think Decisive Armor is a really great one-of because it gives you battle tricks. And I've lost a couple of games to Decisive Armor. Mind the Gap 97 asks what I think of Gravekeepers this format. He gives me a couple reasons why he thinks they're good, including the fact that they have a very good Shadow and Satellar Knight matchup in theory. My problem with them is that their other matchups are probably their most important matchups, and they're going to lose to those matchups every time. Gravekeepers have a couple of tricks to play against Clifforts and Burning Abyss, but not enough to keep up with the crazy amounts of advantage that Burning Abyss and Clifforts have. You would have to side real heavily for Clifforts and Burning Abyss in order to survive with Gravekeepers this format. And even then, they just do not produce enough advantage in order to really do much. Surrounded by Nargles, which is now my favorite YouTube name, asks, when investing in a deck, do you find it wise to buy packs, single cards, or entire decks? I would say that it's never a good idea, as I said before, to buy packs as an investment purpose. Packs are always random, and you're almost always going to get less out of your packs than you paid money for. There are, of course, very notable exceptions, but that's usually the rule. As far as buying entire decks, I would say that since you're probably going to be trying to customize that deck out, it's probably not a good idea unless you need the deck, like, right now. Generally, the best idea is to buy single cards as you need them. That way you can build the deck that you want to build while not getting any extras and not having to spend an excessive amount of money to possibly not get all the cards you need. J-Red Scoots asks how big Soul Transition is going to be in Clifforts. It's going to be incredible in Clifforts. Clifforts probably get the best support out of this set by far, because Reclafort is an amazing card, Alias is a really good card, and Turnover Soul, also known as Soul Transition, is just a phenomenal card. It allows you to trigger Carrier and Helix during your opponent's turn, and in the mirror match, that Helix is crucial, and in the process allows you to draw cards, searching for possibly more Scouts, or for more Floodgate cards. J-Rod Scoots also asks, how many discs will be run in Clifforts after Secrets of Eternity? Probably 2. My ratio right now is 2 discs and 1 Alias / Stealth. Finally, he asks how long Clifforts are going to be Tier 1 for. I think that really depends on how good Nekroz are in the coming format, and particularly how much Darklaw we're going to be seeing. After Darklaw comes out, I see Clifforts probably seeing a little bit of dip in play, but they're probably still going to be Tier 1. Yugi Skills asks what decks that aren't coming out in the Secret Forces I think will have the best balance of budgetness and likelihood of being successful. Probably Masked Heroes, though I would say that most of the meta decks right now are fairly relatively budget decks in comparison to most metas in the past. Other than that, I don't see a lot of rogue decks being successful. I was just answering the door for our guest, my lovely workout partner, Devin Crowley, who will be joining us for the rest of this video, I suppose. I don't really have any good place for you to sit.
Stand?
You can stand and juggle Satsumas. Okay.
Are you sure they're Satsumas?
That's a special talent. Maybe they're like cuties. Let's move on. What was I working on? Oh, I was on Peter Cobb's question, who asks, RJ, do you think that with cards such as Kaiser Coliseum, Trapstun, and Vanity's Emptiness, that Battling Boxers could become a Tier 1 or Tier 2 deck if ran by a good player who understands the meta? Now, I would say that once Battling Boxers get Nova Caesar, then they'll be in pretty good shape, but as it is right now, Kaiser Coliseum is the only thing that's fairly unique to them, but Kaiser Coliseum isn't that great a card this format. I mean, I've seen a couple of Bujin players top this format already, and none of them ran Kaiser Coliseum. For a great Bujin deck, I would definitely suggest you guys go over to Alex Simo's channel, also known as Simo, where Playmatter YugiTube had a great profile on a Cliffort deck that won fairly recently. And that's Devin removing his shirt. That is the second one of my friends that we have seen relatively naked in one of my videos. And there's your in-flight entertainment for the rest of this video. The Danish asks, if I could change one rule in the game, what would it be? Easy. I would change the extra deck to 25 cards. As long as the extra deck isn't unlimited, I have no reason why the extra deck should be limited down to only 15 cards when there are so many different ways to go into the extra deck this format. And since we're getting so many new Synchro monsters and Xyz monsters and Fusion monsters, basically every new pack that comes out. Geranium Battle asks where I get my official rulings. I get my official rulings from various judge forums that are open pretty much exclusively to judges. There are some places where you can go. There are definitely people that you can ask. If you know a judge, you can ask them for official rulings and they'll be able to ask about them. But the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is official rulings are kind of a myth for the most part. Konami very rarely actually gives out real rulings, except tournament-specific rulings, and we all know about those. Andrew Smith asks what my favorite format was, and what my favorite movie is. Well, the format one is easy, Dragon Rulers. The Fall Dragon Ruler format, the Ravine Rulers, those were my most favorite format because I just loved the mirror match between Ravine Ruler decks. That was a lot of fun. I'd say that the Debris Hime format when we got into TCG was really great. As far as my favorite movie, it's a really tough choice, but I would have to say it's a toss-up between The Constant Gardener, which is good, serious, conspiracy, action-y stuff, with a good, healthy dose of depression. On the other side, there is The World's End, which is the final of the trilogy with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in it. That's just such a great trilogy, and I love The World's End, and I have just great memories involved in watching that. Destroyer831642 asks, which is better to have in your hand, a good quantity of cards or a good quality of cards? It really depends. So what I'd say is that generally if you have a small number of really high quality cards, those are going to be power cards. And for a lot of times, power cards like Soul Charge or something like that are worth multiple monsters in your hand. They're worth multiple cards in your hand. But there are definitely times in which for a deck to function, it has to have a lot of mediocre cards. When I say that a deck is a combo deck, I mean that it uses a bunch of not-so-hot cards to make an incredible combo, like Mermails. Mermail monsters on their own are not particularly great, but when you have a bunch of them together and you make them in combo, they make these incredible, unbreakable boards. So I would really say it would depend on your deck and how many power cards you're running and how important those power cards are to your deck. He also asks, in terms of Mask of Restrict, how good a card it is against the Nekloth and Cliffort matchups. Against Nekloths and Clifforts, so I've played against a deck that ran Mask of Restrict and Clifforts, and Clifforts have a real issue with it. If it had been a better and a faster deck, Mask of Restrict would have caused me a lot of issues. If you're having trouble finding ways of siding against both Nekloths and Clifforts, I would say that Mask of Restrict is definitely a good way to go. He also asks what I think of high-speed Roid Makindama, and I think that it's not that great. None of its effects are particularly good, even the one that special summons itself in the graveyard since it stops your normal summon. And then he asks about Clearwing Synchro Dragon, which I think is amazing. I would say that you guys should definitely check those cards out and try them out in your decks. Finally, he asks what exactly constitutes speed in a deck, and I would say how quickly you can do the thing that your deck intends to do. For instance, Clifforts are a very fast deck because they can put Cliffort monsters on the board with floodgates really quickly. Mermails are a really fast deck because they can put a bunch of monsters with really good effects on the board very quickly. Satellar Knights are probably a slower deck because they can't put Xyz monsters on the board as quickly, which is what they really want to do. And for our final question, WheezyLeaf90383 asks, would you run a 3000 attack 4-star normal monster? And if not, how many attack points would a 4-star normal monster with no effect need for me to run it? Well, it depends, because the thing is, like, what are you going to do with it? You could run it in a deck that could potentially put normal monsters on the board, and then use it for, like, White Elephant's Gift, so you could summon it, run over a monster, and then use it for White Elephant's Gift, and draw 2 cards. Like, that would be pretty cool. It really depends on the situation in which you run it. If your deck can run normal monsters effectively, then I would say I would go for it. 3,000 attack points is nothing to sniff at. But in competitive decks that I am running right now, I probably would not find a place for a 3,000 attack point 4-star normal monster. That's just kind of how insane this game has gotten recently. So there you guys go. That is the Q&A, and that is Casual Friday. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you did, let me know why in the comment section below. And of course, subscribe for more decks, discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Remember that if you want me to answer one of your questions on the next Casual Friday, ask me in the comment section below. I cannot guarantee that I will get to your question in the next video. Oftentimes, if you ask a question, I've already answered it into another video, so I would suggest you check out my other Casual Friday videos. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching. I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.